Welcome again to my video blog. The Christmas vacation is very much over, and I'm trying to motivate myself to get back to working on my master's thesis. This is proving a little bit difficult for me because I have a little bit of difficulty motivating myself, especially now that I have nothing to do besides working on my master's thesis project. But fortunately, I got good news. I got an A in the last course that I took for my master's degree, so this means I'll have a perfect 4.0 GPA for my master's, which should help me get into another university to do a PhD. So hopefully I'll get my funding and then I should get accepted pretty easily. So this is quite encouraging. Also, following the last video that I posted talking about the difficulties I had as a teenager and dealing with mental illness, I got several messages that were very supportive, and thank you for these messages. It's nice to know that there's many people out there that went through similar difficulties, and it's nice to know that my video has been helpful and to get some encouragement every once in a while. So thanks to my supporters. But moving on, today's topic is, in my opinion, one of the most important questions that trans people ask themselves at some point. Is, should I transition? Should I make the big step? But first of all, I'd like to ask the question, what does it mean to transition? And well, I think most people, when they think of transition, they think of eventually going full-time. So they think of transitioning from living in society as the gender that that people perceive you to be, and transitioning into living as the gender that you perceive yourself to be, that you want to live your life as you want to be perceived as. So this is what people mean by transition. But for most trans people, it's kind of scary because going full-time involves a great many steps, and it involves many risks. You can get rejected by people in general on the street. If you don't pass, they can be hostile. But also, most importantly, you could be rejected by your family, you could be rejected by your friends, you could be rejected by your coworkers, and people wonder, am I going to lose my job because of this? If my employer is not supportive, am I going to jeopardize my future? What is going to happen to me? Because, let's not kid ourselves, transition can make a huge difference in your life. You can, transition and have a completely different life when you're done. You can end up with very different people, very different friends, and a very different work situation too. Some people even move as part of their transition process because they don't feel that their current environment is accepting enough. So it's a big life decision. It's very scary, and most people don't know, and most people also delay transition quite a bit. There's quite many transsexuals that transition when they're 50, 60, even older. And these people, if you ask them, most of them have thought about transitioning earlier, but they'll tell you that when they were young, it wasn't acceptable to do this, and that their situation wasn't good enough to be able to do this. They didn't really have the freedom, so they waited for years and years and years, and at some point they just couldn't take it anymore. They couldn't take living under a false pretense, pretending to be what they were not, and at some point they just cracked, and they did it because many of them will tell you that they just couldn't take it anymore. They were almost having a nervous breakdown or depression. Some of them even got to the point where they were having suicidal thoughts. So they just couldn't endure it anymore. Personally, I've chosen to transition now when I'm young because I feel like it's much easier. I'm a university student, and I know my university is going to be supportive of this. They openly say that they're supportive of being trans. I know that people here are very educated, very open-minded. I don't yet have my own family, and I'm at a point in my life where I don't really have a real job, so I'm not really afraid of losing my job. And in a sense, I'm not really risking too much. And also, I know that I stand a chance of being full-time before I enter the job market, which will, in my opinion, make things much easier. But before I talk about transition a little more, I'd like to break it down into what it involves, because I think many people see transition as this whole thing, they see it as going full time, and that's really scary. But there's many things that you can do in your transition that are not necessarily risky for you. For example, if you're an MTF transsexual, it might be possible for you to get electrolysis or laser hair removal on your face, to eliminate your facial hair. This is something that if you want to go full time, you're going to have to do anyways, but it's something you can do, without really anybody suspecting that you're even transitioning. People might notice that something is going on, with your face, when you get those treatments, but I don't really have to know why. And, you can even tell them, I'm getting my facial hair removed, I can't stand shaving anymore. People aren't really going to ask that many questions. You can also shave, like, this is funny, but I've talked to many trans people, and some of them, they're so afraid of people knowing that they won't even shave their legs or their arms because, they're afraid that people might notice and ask questions. But I have to say, if you're going to transition, at some point you're going to have to, take your courage and do it. You have to be able to face the reactions of people. And maybe, small things like this can be a practice for you. If you're afraid of shaving your arms because you know that people might comment on it, then why don't you just do it? You're allowed to do it. There's nothing illegal about shaving your arms. There's nothing particularly gay about shaving your arms. So why don't you just do it? And if people ask you why, you just say because you feel more comfortable that way. And if they make fun of you, you just give them the finger and you tell them, fuck you. It's my body, it's my right. I don't give a fuck what you think. Go away. Let me live my life in peace. Let me do this. I have the right to. I think at some point, if you want to transition, you have to be able to tell people that anyways, but you can practice with, small decisions like this. But okay, at some point, I think the most important thing that people are going to want to do as part of the transition process is taking hormones, and feminizing their body in a more permanent manner. But people are really scared of hormones because they don't really know what kind of effects it can have. They don't really know if the effects are reversible or not. And at some point, I'd like to make a video where I address the question of hormones and their effects and everything. I know about hormones in a little bit more detail, but I have to say, it's possible to try hormones for a little while without really having any irreversible effects. The main effect that's really not reversible from hormones is that if you're male to female, you might experience a reduction in your fertility. So if you're going to take hormones, you should probably go to a sperm clinic first, and you should freeze some sperm. This is not really expensive, for a small number of samples. It's going to cost you like $500, but it's a guarantee you're taking. You're freezing some sperm so that if you ever want to have biological children someday, you're going to be able to no matter what. If you are a female to male transsexual, then you can also freeze eggs, but you probably don't have to worry too much because it's actually very possible for female to male transsexuals to recover their fertility even after they've been on hormones for a while too. But anyways, as far as male to female transsexuals are concerned, most of the changes that you're going to experience, being on hormones for a couple of months, something like 4 months, are very much reversible. The fat redistribution, getting like rounder cheeks in your face and less facial hair, less body hair, those kinds of changes are very much reversible. And I would even, encourage you, if you're seriously considering hormones, if you are seriously thinking of going full time, you probably, should talk to a doctor, inform yourself about hormones and think about trying them for a little bit just to see if you like the feeling, because it's going to alter your moods a little bit. It's going to alter the way you feel, and you probably want to see if you can deal with that. If you're on hormones and anti-androgens, it's going to reduce your sex drive, and you probably want to try hormones for a little bit to see if it's for you or not. But if you do this properly, if you freeze some sperm ahead of time, if you do this under the supervision of a doctor, I think the risks are actually very low. The main risk from taking hormones for MTFs is going to be blood clotting, but if you take some of the more modern hormones, such as estradiol valerate injections or estradiol pills, those risks are actually very, very small, much smaller than if you take some of the older, more dangerous hormone formulations, such as Premarin or ethinyl estradiol, which is found in some old birth control pills. Ethinyl estradiol is actually one of the most dangerous kinds of estrogen that you can take, and you very much shouldn't take, because there's much better products that are out there nowadays. But anyways, I think if you want to transition and you're taking of hormones, you should inform yourselves, and at some point, think about trying them. But before you do that, you probably should ensure that your environment is supportive, and you also want to ensure that you can take hormones without interruption, because getting on and off the hormones constantly is not very good. It's also not very effective when it comes to feminization. So I would encourage people, when they're starting hormones, make sure that if you start them, you can ensure that you never have to stop. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have to get off the hormones. But anyways, the biggest obstacle to transition is probably your family and your friends. If you're scared of transitioning, it might very much be because you're with a partner who doesn't support you in this process. Perhaps you're even married with children, and transition seems very intimidating because you're thinking that you might lose all these people. I personally would say that if you are really thinking about transition, you probably should start telling these people, start telling your partner about your intentions, start telling your partner about your feelings, because in a sense, if your partner doesn't know that you have a desire to transition, then your partner doesn't really know you, doesn't really know the true person that you are inside. And if you really want to bond with someone, it's the kind of information that your partner should probably know anyways. And you also want to make sure that your partner is supportive before starting this, because transitioning, if your partner is not supportive, it's going to mean that you probably will lose this person. Or if you find out your partner is not supportive and you decide not to transition, it's another option. But I think that transitioning without your partner knowing, starting hormones without your partner knowing, is not a good idea, because your partner is inevitably going to find out at some point. It can affect your sex drive, it can affect the way you look. Your partner can find your hormones at some point, and if your partner doesn't know, it's just going to slow you down eventually. So it's the kind of thing that I very much think that you should discuss with the people you care about. That being said, I don't think that your friends and your more distant family should have a word to say when it comes to your transition. If people reject you because you transition, then they're not really your friends. And if your parents, are telling you that you mustn't transition, well, that hurts when people tell you that. It hurts when your parents tell you that, but at some point, you have to make these important life decisions for yourself. You can't let your parents, you can't let your brother or sister, you can't let your friends tell you how to live your life. Because if you don't transition now, and 20 years from now, you have a very bad depression, and you really regret, not transitioning earlier, you're not going to be happy about this. It's probably not the best way to go about dealing with these problems. Trying to push them away is probably not the best idea. But anyways, maybe you're very early in a transition process and you don't even know if transition is for you. Maybe it's something that seems a little distant. Maybe you're just questioning yourself about your own gender identity. If that's the case, I would say, why not experiment? You can very easily, go to Salvation Army and buy some girl clothes if you're an MTF, or some boy clothes if you're an FTM, and have your little secret wardrobe, and you can cross-dress every once in a while, and you can see how it makes you feel. And you can eventually, get some friends that are trans or that are cross-dressers, and you can go out with them in public, and you can try, to assume the role of the opposite sex in society a little bit, you can try it and see how that makes you feel, see if you'd like to go farther, and I think that's probably the best thing to do. If you're questioning yourself about your gender identity, then maybe you should get in touch with some people like you. Maybe you should search for forums where there are other trans people on the internet, contact other people, make friends, and explore these issues so you can figure out what's right for you, eventually. Because if you push these problems, if you try to force yourself to be normal by ignoring these problems, then most likely you're just going to hurt yourself in the long term, because if you're transsexual and you try to live in denial, it's just going to come back at you later on, and the more you'll wait, the more uncomfortable it will be. And of course, the longer you wait to transition, the worse it will be, because the longer you wait, the less passable you'll be when you transition. I've seen some transsexuals that have transitioned very early, like in their early teenage years, when they had barely started puberty, and now they look completely, I've seen some MTFs that did this, and they look completely like women. You just can't tell, and they haven't had any surgical procedures. I think they're really lucky to have been able to start it so early. But I'm lucky too, because I'm starting in my early 20s, and I think that when I'm going to be done, I should be able to be pretty passable, and that makes it a lot easier, of course. But if you start, transitioning when you're in your 40s and your 50s, your chances of passing are much lower, and also, it means that you're going to have, much less young years of your life to enjoy living in the gender role that you were meant to be, which is kind of sad. I personally wish, that I could have lived my teenage life, as a girl. But anyways, at some point, if you really want to transition, you have to accept yourself the way you are, in your body, and then, make the moves necessary to change your life. That being said, I don't think that anybody can just jump into transition. I think it's something that should be very progressive, or at least I myself, have chosen to make my transition very progressive, to go slowly at my own pace, so that it's never too fast, so that I never feel disoriented or at risk of anything. I've been transitioning for a couple of years now, actually, and it took me a while, but I've built myself a wardrobe of girl clothes. I almost have no boy clothes anymore. And I've been on hormones for a little while, and I've started laser hair removal on my face also about 2 years ago, and I've had many sessions now, and I'm doing these things very progressively, but at least I don't feel rushed. I don't feel like I'm pushing myself too hard, and I think that's important, because if I ever decide that transition is not for me, I can always go back. If you start transition and your goal is to transition, in 6 months or a year, and that goal is very inflexible, and you might find at some point that you're going too fast, and you're hurting yourself, and you're becoming depressed, and maybe things won't go as you planned. Sometimes it's hard to make things happen as fast as you'd like, and of course, there's some people. If you're 16 and you still live with your parents, and your parents are hardcore religious conservatives, then most likely you won't be able to transition in that kind of environment. If you try to start hormones, then they have control over what kinds of packages you can get in the mail. They will probably stop your hormone supply. They might kick you out. You might find yourself dropping out of school, and that's really not good. That's really, really not good. I personally would say that if you're in school, you should at least finish high school before, you should at least make sure that you're comfortable before you start transition. If being in high school, starting transition will cause you to drop out predictably, then you probably shouldn't do it, But of course, if your parents are supportive, then all the power to you. But if they're not, you might have to wait and move out and live on your own before you can really start at least the hormone parts, and the visible changes in your appearance. But there's things that you can do. You can explore your gender identity. You can go out and cross-dress with your friends in secret. You can practice your female voice. You can grow your hair long, or grow it the way you want. You can experiment with makeup, get makeup skills. You can start maybe building your wardrobe. And if you still live with your parents and your parents aren't supportive, then maybe you can find a friend who's supportive and store, your female or male clothes at your friend's house, And you can start exploring your gender even if you're in an environment where people aren't really supportive of your transition. But of course, transition has a cost, obviously it costs a lot of money. Laser hair removal can cost up to $10,000 if you want to remove hair on all of your body. Well, it might not cost you that much, but it can cost up to that much. A sex change, can go up to $20,000. Facial feminization surgery can be anywhere, from $10,000 to $50,000. The hormones can cost as much as, $150, $200 a month, or as little as $20 a month, depending on what you're taking. And of course, all the female clothes, getting a whole new wardrobe can cost anywhere from $2,000 to $15,000. So of course, transition has a big cost in terms of money, but likely it'll also cost you, some friends. Some of your friends might not be supportive. You might lose them, but you're going to make new friends. So, transition in the end, I think, has a lot of costs. You might even have to move because your environment is not supportive. You might even have to think about changing job. But in the end, the goal is to be happier with yourself. The goal is to be happier in your own body, happier with your gender role, happier with the way society treats you. And once you're happier, maybe you can start living a more fulfilling life. And you should remember that being a transsexual, doesn't mean that you'll lose your job. It doesn't mean that you will lose your friend. It doesn't mean that you will lose your family. People can come around. Your family, even if they're not supportive at first, they might become more supportive when they see that you're happier in your new gender role. And the people at your job, might also be willing to accept this. Your friends can also come around, so it's just a matter of adaptation. And I think taking the time to plan things carefully. If you try to rush yourself in your transition, the cost might be more than you can bear. You have to give yourself the time to adapt. You have to give the people around you maybe some time to adapt. And you have to be able to change your environment progressively, and plan things carefully. So in the end, whether you should transition or not is going to be a question that you're going to have to answer. You can go see a gender therapist for years. I went to see one for a few months, and I can tell you that gender therapists will most likely not tell you whether or not you should transition. Gender therapists will help you question yourself about these issues, but in the end, you're going to be the one who has to answer and make the final decision. But if you want to make an informed decision, perhaps you can take time to explore these gender issues. You can take time to familiarize yourself with what it means to be a man or a woman. And then, you can start making changes very progressively. And remember that if you go very progressively, it's never impossible to go back. I've been on hormones now for several months. I own a female wardrobe and all of that. But if I decided at some point that I want to live as a man, I could stop the hormones and I would start to masculinize pretty quickly. I could buy myself some male clothes and sell my female clothes. I could cut my hair short. For me, it's perfectly conceivable that I could go back to living as a man if I wanted to, and I wouldn't lose anything really. I have frozen sperm if I want to have a baby that's genetically my own, so I'm safe. And having this fail-safe, makes it much less stressful because I know that by going through this transition process, I'm not trapping myself. It's always reversible until you go all the way and decide to have a sex change. Transition should be pretty much reversible, which makes it much less stressful, as I just said. And as far as the sex change is concerned, you might be wondering, maybe what's keeping you from transitioning is the question of the sex change. But what I have to say about that is that having a sex change is not obligatory. You know, you can be transsexual without having a sex change, and you can also wait quite a while before having a sex change. You can be on hormones, you know, for maybe a couple years, maybe a couple months, and live in your desired gender role for a while, you know, to take the time to make sure that having a sex change is really what you want. And once you're really sure, you know, then, you know, being really sure is going to help you have no regrets. You know, make sure that you won't regret having a sex change in the end. You know, it's one of the reasons that you shouldn't rush your transition. I mean, I've seen people who have a sex change really, really fast. You know, because if you go to Thailand, you know, you just give them the money, they give you your sex change now. It's really easy. You don't need any letters. But, you know, if you do it too fast and you regret it in the end, the sex change is really the one thing about transition that you can't reverse. So in my opinion, you know, that kind of decision you should probably leave for the end, because I think the sex change, you know, should not be the thing that defines you as a transsexual. You know, the point of transition is not the sex change, it's to live in your desired gender role. And living in your desired gender role is something that you can do by changing your appearance, changing your environment, getting on hormones, etc. You know, in the end, your genitals, people only see them if you show them, you know, and the sex change should really be the icing on the cake, and only if you want to have your sex change. You know, there are many transsexuals out there that live as men or women in society. You know, they're transitioned, they're full-time, and they haven't had a sex change, and they're perfectly happy that way. Okay, so this is all I had to say about this topic. I hope that this video was helpful to you. Of course, if you have any comments, feel free to post them. Feel free to make a video response. Feel free to send me personal messages or ask me questions, and I'll try to answer them as quickly as possible. So that's it. Have a happy 2009, everybody. Bye bye.